Welcome to the BlackTrack, where I do commentary and review on movies with an all-black cast, or at least a black lead. Usually, I try to go in a certain order that I plan out in advance when it comes to the movies that I do on this channel. But today's movie has been requested or co-signed so many times that I decided to just bump it to the front of the line, which is fine because ironically, it kind of ties into the last video I just did on Hollywood Shuffle. I say all that just to let you guys know that I do read all of your comments. Today's movie is The 5 Heartbeats. A film that certainly needs no introduction, but one that also has a long and complicated history that could have taken it in a bunch of different directions. The movie was once again directed by Robert Townsend and originally co-written by Keenen Ivory Wayans. Nope, you're not experiencing deja vu. A lot of the pre-production of this movie mimics a lot of what happened prior to Hollywood Shuffle. Immediately following the success of that movie in 1987, Robert Townsend now had a little bit of bargaining power and immediately got to work writing his next movie in 1988. Being a huge fan of the Temptations growing up, Townsend always wondered what exactly led to the group breaking up, and he went as far as tracking down former lead singer David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks to find out. This led to Townsend creating a fictional story with a fictional group that tells the story of the many highs and lows experienced by several black singing groups in the 50s through the 70s. The original casting of the movie looked way different from what you may remember, and a ton of well-known actors read for the movie throughout its pre-production. I'll go into more detail throughout the video. With everything falling into place so quickly, what can go wrong? Everything, of course. And I feel like Robert Townsend should have known better with his past experiences. Warner Brothers, the original studio attached to it, decided not to pick the movie up, and the film basically fell into a 3-year development hell. In that time, every single actor attached to it went on to do other projects, including Keenen Ivory Wayans, who in the meantime signed with Fox for a little sketch comedy show called In Living Color. You might have heard of it. Eventually, the movie was picked up by 20th Century Fox and completely recast, with the exception of Robert Townsend, who was always going to play the songwriter and co-founder of the group, Donald Duck Matthews. One more change that the studio wanted was the removal of David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks as advisors. They feared Motown might sue, thinking it was a Temptations biopic. So instead, they enlisted the services of old school singing group The Dells, who became the new advisors and even provided the vocals for the fictional group in the movie. There's a whole lot more to the production of The 5 Heartbeats that I have time to talk about here today, and I encourage all of you to check out the excellent 2018 documentary, The Making of The 5 Heartbeats, to learn more. To say that The 5 Heartbeats had a lot working against it, it's not nearly saying enough, but did the movie find a way against all odds to sing and dance its way into people's hearts? Let's BlackTrack and find out. Never mind the fact that The 5 Heartbeats starts at the end of the movie and kind of inadvertently gives away the entire plot. Forget that for a second. The biggest issue here is the movie having the audacity to try to age up Robert Townsend, like he hasn't looked 45 his entire life. The beginning of The 5 Heartbeats is kind of a masterclass in how to establish characters in a short amount of time. The movie is 2 hours long, and an argument can be made that it probably should have been longer, since it's kind of a biopic in a way. But the movie does its best with the time that it's given to work with by using, that's right, you guessed it, musical montages. In the first 10 minutes, The 5 Heartbeats not only establishes the entire main cast, but also establishes their personalities and motivations while simultaneously moving the story forward. It sounds so simple, but yet so many other movies fail to do it and end up with undefined characters that you can't connect with. Right from the start, we know that Terrence Dresser Williams, played by that damn Harry Lennox, obsesses over the dance moves and is possibly the oldest and the voice of reason in the group. Plus, he has a girlfriend present named Brenda, played by the weirdly underutilized Teresa Randall. In the original script, Dresser and his girlfriend Brenda were going to be played by David Allen Greer and Vanessa Williams. We learned that Anthony Stone, aka Choir Boy, played by Tico Wells, is, well, a literal choir boy who grew up in the church. The Bible he carries kind of gives it away, but it's also a nice touch. I last talked about Tico Wells way back on my Drop Squad video. He played Fat Money, the drug dealer that the incompetent squad could not break. As I mentioned, Robert Townsend plays Donald Duck Matthews, and he's stressing over writing the lyrics. His older brother JT Matthews is played by Leon Robinson from Above the Rim, and he tries to catch 2 bodies the minute he shows up on the screen. And when I say catch a body, I don't mean kill somebody. Well, that depends on your definition of killing it, I guess. Then to round out the group is Eddie King Jr., played by Michael Wright from Sugar Hill, and lead singer Bobby Casanova, played by Lamont Johnson from Class Act. And for all you smarty art Negroes keeping count, I know that's technically 6 guys, but both Eddie and Bobby get into it with some gamblers, and Bobby ends up on the worst end of it.
Oh, my good leg! Oh, shit! My other leg!
Last I checked, you don't need legs to sing. Hell, Curtis Mayfield recorded an entire album while laying on his back. Hey, you don't have to believe me. Look it up for yourself. Then Eddie apparently just leaves him out there. And then to add insult to injury, he steals his lead singer spot. I'm confused as to how they were announced as the 5 heartbeats, and Duck goes on and on about the 5-part harmony, but yet it was obviously 6 members. If Eddie was a backup, then he was one hell of a backup. They needed all the help they could get though, because the performance was butt cheeks. We'll always just have to wonder what Bobby sounds like. They actually did film a scene for laughs showing what happened to Bobby after the fact, but in the final film, he's never seen again. Now with the performance being so clumsy, it's no wonder that they were noticed by the nicest man in the management industry. And no, that is not a compliment. No real self-respecting manager would have ever given them a shot after that fiasco, but Jimmy Potter here, played by the late Chuck Patterson, will take anybody at this point. See, every group he has ever had has left him for better opportunities. Even his own wife Eleanor, played by the late Diane Carroll, knows he's not built for this. And she would know, because she's a psychic. Alright, now tell the truth. How many of you all were saying Eddie Kane, K-A-N-E, instead of the right way to say it, Eddie King, K-I-N-G, all this time? Don't be ashamed. This is a safe space. You're amongst friends. Because I didn't realize the right way to say it until about 10 years ago. Eddie Kane just sounds way cooler, so I never even challenged it. Anyway, Eddie King Jr. has a girlfriend named Baby Doll, played by Troy Byer, and I only bring her up for 2 reasons. One, because if you remember, Troy Byer would go on to write the movie Baps, which was also directed by Robert Townsend. You can learn more about that in my BlackTrack for Baps. And 2, because if Townsend had his way, she was supposed to be played by Whitney Houston of all people, and in the original script, she was supposed to have a much larger role in the film, singing around 3 songs. Houston's agent talked her out of doing what they considered to be too small of a film, and she admitted to Robert later that it was a mistake. If you think that's wild, then consider that Eddie King was supposed to be played by Denzel Washington, who got too big for the film during its hiatus, which is just a fancy Hollywood way to say he got too expensive. Whitney and Denzel could have starred opposite each other way before The Preacher's Wife. And before you ask, no, I cannot see it. See, here's something that you gotta understand. Dresser is an artist, so he's sensitive about his shit. So when Jimmy brings in one of his old drunk army buddies named Sarge to work on the sloppy dancing, Dresser gets his high waters in a bunch about it. That is until Sarge shows off his happy feet. This isn't just any old dancer that they just found off the street. Sarge is played by the late Harold Nicholas, who was one half of the world famous tap dancing Nicholas brothers. He starred in several films with his brother throughout the 30s and 40s, and I even briefly showed him during Black History Month 2022 when I talked about Uptown Saturday Night. One thing I've always loved about Robert Townsend is that he's a student and a huge fanboy of classic black performers, and he's always going out of his way to showcase them whenever he could. Harold Nicholas isn't the only one. There are several other old school black performers scattered throughout the film. Something else that I like that he does is that he constantly reuses his friends and keeps them in work for his films. This kind of stuff is never talked about when the conversation of black people sticking together is brought up. The 5 Heartbeats actually have a rival group called Bird and the Midnight Falcons, because you haven't made it unless you have haters. And the group is composed entirely of actors who were in Hollywood Shuffle, including Jimmy Woodard, aka Myron, and Roy Fagan again, who never misses an opportunity to ham it up. How this dude never had a larger career on the big screen will always be a mystery to me. Now, this might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, but I always thought that Bird and the Midnight Falcons had the better performance for the amateur night competition, and that they didn't even need to sabotage the 5 heartbeats. But as they say, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So not only is the MC one of the Midnight Falcons' cousins, who doesn't allow the 5 heartbeats to even play the piano, but Bird also enlists the help of a groupie named Cookie, who's played by none other than famous actor and director Casey Lemons, who's almost unrecognizable with all this get-up on. I even saw an argument online a few years back of people debating whether it was really her or not. If you're one of those people, then let me assure you that yes, this is indeed the director of Eve's Bayou herself, Casey Lemons. Needless to say, the fix was in, and it almost worked. But what the Midnight Falcons didn't realize is that Eddie King Jr. is unfuckwittable. Like my boy Martin once said, they decided to do that thing Acapulco and tear the house down. There ain't a dry seat in the house, at least not with a woman in it. Eddie even converts Cookie into a follower, and Casey Lemons' reaction is one of the funniest things in the movie. Remember that old internet clip of a reporter losing it because a lizard jumped on him?
You find in the Metroplex area.
That's the sound I imagine her making here. Hey, I just realized he kissed that girl right in front of Baby Doll. It may somewhat appear this way, but the 5 Heartbeats isn't a comedy, but it does find clever ways to insert humor, and I think it makes for a better movie. That little performance earns them attention from label boss Big Red Davis of Big Red Records, played by Hawthorne James, another great and underrated actor who played One-Eyed Sam in I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, and who's probably most known for being the bus driver in the movie Speed, also named Sam for some reason. In the 5 Heartbeats, he's obviously crooked. They don't even really try to hide it. Even Jimmy can spot it a mile away, probably because this dude most likely stole all his old artists. I think everybody who's ever seen this movie loves the scene where Duck sings a song with his little sister that he's been struggling to write, but there was a real chance that this scene never would have made it in the final film if the studio had anything to say about it. Several chances actually. They kept coming to Robert to get him to remove it, using the logic that the movie was already too long and too expensive, and that scene had nothing to do with the 5 Heartbeats as a group. But Townsend insisted that if they don't use any other scene, they have to leave this one in. He wasn't having it. I think they went back and forth about 4 times before they just let him have it. In my opinion, they're both right. The scene could have been left out and it wouldn't have affected the larger story. They already showed him earlier trying to write the same song, and the 5 Heartbeats themselves never even sang it in the movie. However, the fact that the scene is so iconic, and the fact that Tressa Thomas, who plays the sister, kills it, and the fact that the scene is just so wholesome, with Duck pulling papers out of all kinds of spots to give it to his sister in time, kinda proves that Townsend was right to fight for it. It's a scene that adds a lot to the movie without actually adding anything to the movie, if that makes sense. The 5 Heartbeats have no choice but to fool with Big Red, because the alternative is dealing with white studio execs who want to use their songs to promote white groups instead, Elvis style. Hey, Big Red is shady, but I'll give him a little credit. Without him checking all the boxes on the crooked exec checklist, the Heartbeats may not have gotten any exposure. He gets them radio play, he gets them photo shoots, he gets them cars, you know, the usual trinkets. More importantly, he gets them a tour, much to the dismay of Choir Boy's father, played by J.D. Walker. I mean, there's no way that Big Red would make them pay all this stuff back without actually telling them they have to, right? Nah. The cracks in the system start showing early when they get a look at their first album cover. What in the Brady Bunch bullshit is this? There's actually a jacked up history and backstory behind this. Back in these days, sometimes labels would release an album cover with white people on it to make it more appealing to other white people who may like the song but couldn't possibly bring themselves to buy something with niggers on the cover. The horror! No group was immune to this either, and acts like the Isley Brothers and even the Dells themselves fell victim to it. There's a big argument and even some pushback about it, but nothing ever really comes from it in the movie. The issue is just dropped, which is a disappointment to me, especially after how great the lines are delivered.
They can accept our music as long as they can't see our faces.
Man, take it easy on the dude. It's Big Red's idea.
It's a good one, too, man. First we build up a strong crossover audience, then we can come out strong.
I expect that from you, Harry Lennox. Of course, this is a fake biopic with a story as old as time, and that means that there's going to be big highs and the lowest of the lows. After a musical montage showing all the great things their popularity brought them over the last 2 years, we start seeing the group fall apart, but at least they fall apart in realistic ways that make sense for their characters. Choir Boy goes from being shy and unconfident to completely shunning his church ways and even trying to muscle his way into the lead singer role. JT gets tired of being a womanizer and decides he just wants a woman who loves him for him. And Eddie King continues hanging with the wrong crowd until he gets hooked on drugs and starts showing up to performances late. Hey, that's just fine as far as Choir Boy and Flash is concerned. Oh yeah, I didn't bring up Flash. He's a flashy singer whose career ran parallel with the Five Heartbeats. He's played by James Canada Terrell, and I don't know if he's supposed to be based off anybody, but he's presented as the type of singer who will do anything to get ahead. That includes cozying up to Jimmy. Well, what do you know? Bird and the Midnight Falcons actually did get a record deal, but the money is a little funny, so he confronts Big Red about it. And you know what? I can't even be mad that he even had the balls to not only confront him, but even call him out on his shady bookkeeping. My only problem with it is, bruh, you got a whole singing group. Why would you come up here by yourself? Big Red has like 3 bodyguards present, but he doesn't even need them. And since this is the 60s, he doo-wops all over Bird and does his best Suge Knight impression, dangling Bird over a balcony for the Vanilla Ice Challenge. He doesn't kill him, but he does humble him and delivers some cold classic lines in the process.
My office hours are from 9 to 5.
Yeah,
Excuse me, lady.
Yeah. My office hours are from
9 to 5.
Oh, but that doesn't just work on everybody. When Red tries to force Jimmy out and make Eddie the focus of the group, Jimmy lets him know he better find somebody else to play with because I'm not one of your little friends. None of that matters though, because Red has them over the proverbial barrel, seeing as they owe him for the cars, the money, the hoes, the clothes, the whole shebang-a-bang. Jimmy is just a little too bureaucratic about it for me though. You can't threaten to take a criminal to court and then just go home. They don't operate like that. They see you as only garbage, and when it's time, they take out the trash. Literally. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that Red orders Jimmy to be killed by a sanitation truck. And if that's not trashy enough, Red even shows up to the funeral, pretends to be upset, and even comes on to Jimmy's wife. Who gonna check him though? Sarge? Yeah, right. Eddie, you motherfucker. I guess they had to give Dresser something to do since he don't do the dances anymore. He's got one last routine to try out on Eddie's ass though. It's pretty powerful that he ends up consoling him at the end because through it all, he still loves him as a brother. He got to get the hell on out the group, but he still loves him. If you've ever wondered why this scene was so good, it's because the tension on the set was very real. By most accounts, Michael Wright was hell to work with on the set and was even accused of ruining certain shots on purpose, which pissed off Robert Townsend to the point of coming to blows because the studio told him there would be no more reshoots. Needless to say, everybody on set had a love-hate relationship with Michael Wright, and the one person to calm everybody down and get things in order was Harry Lennox. Robert Townsend jokes that people were willing to listen to him because with his glasses on, he kinda looked like Malcolm X. I know I talk a lot of trash about Harry Lennox, but it's all jokes, and I greatly respect him as an actor, especially when I hear little known behind the scenes stories like this. Here's an example of why I said the 5 Heartbeats could have afforded to be a little longer, because we learned that Big Red went to prison for Jimmy's death with a floating news article. It gets no major attention. It's just squeezed in with the news that the Heartbeats signed with a new label and that they replaced Eddie with Flash. Then suddenly, it's the 70s, and it feels like so much has happened that we just missed. Like JT feeling outshined by Flash and putting him on notice about who the original seat wetters were. Get out of here, rookie. They should probably talk a little more nicely to Flash though, because the alternative is in no condition to perform. Eddie King looks way worse than when we last saw him, but the time lapse is less of a surprise since we already saw him using drugs earlier. So it's no shock that that monkey is on his back heavy. He wants back in the group, and to prove it, he plays the classics to show the guys what time it is.
Nights like this, I wish raindrops would fall.
Oh man, this is uncomfortable, but also realistic. If you ever wondered why a lot of groups from the past replaced members or broke up, there were various reasons, but drugs was usually at the top of that list. It's ironic that the Heartbeats have a song about raindrops falling, and Eddie singing it may have been a bad omen because when it rains, it pours, and when it pours, it storms. So basically, it's about the flood from here. The Five Heartbeats takes a weird left turn towards the end of the movie. When Duck decides to marry a girl he's basically been stalking this entire movie, but it pisses JT off and we're led to believe it's just because she's some groupie or something. Then to further obscure the issue, Duck suspects that his fiance is having an affair with Choir Boy after seeing them hug. But then he follows her to a hotel and learns she's actually there with his brother JT. But the reality is that her and JT used to date, which the movie really doesn't touch on, and now JT thinks she's only marrying Duck to make him jealous. She denies it and declares her love for Duck. What was all that Choir Boy stuff about then? You mean to tell me he wasn't laying hands? It's too late to make it right though, and at an award ceremony, Duck goes in on JT and accuses him of always being a selfish brother. Duck has the absolute worst timing because this happens immediately after Flash announces that he's leaving the group and going solo. Damn, read the room, Duck. But this rivalry has been building the entire movie, so it had to come out at some point. It's just a shame that it effectively ends the Five Heartbeats. The group, not the movie. No, the movie catches back up with the beginning, where it's now the 80s, and we get 15 feel-good minutes where we learn that Choir Boy went back to his dad's church, Eddie King Jr. got clean and got saved, and Duck is convinced by Eddie to reconcile with his brother, who he hadn't spoken to in years. The movie ends with a cookout, and I think it's one of the most wholesome parts of the movie. It's never really pointed out, but I like the fact that the entire Heartbeats stayed with the same women they had from the beginning of the movie. That's something that's rare with real music groups, but an important and understated part of the story. Then I like the fact that Robert Townsend kept a running joke going for the entire movie with Duck and JT's cousins, one of which is played by Townsend's favorite Bobby McGee. They appear at various parts of the film, always with a new gimmick, so it's fun to see them here still trying at the end. Then there's the best part, when Leon flips out at seeing Flash on TV teaming up with the five white guys who tried to steal their music earlier, and decides to show everybody what real music is. This makes the Heartbeats come together one last time and forgive all transgressions, and I for one am happy that the movie has a happy ending and the entire group is still alive. But hold up, what happened to Bobby Casanova? Did everybody just forget about him after that one night? He was the lead singer, for God's sakes. He had to be more important than that. He can't even get an invite to the cookout? Let's get to the grade. The Five Heartbeats is a special movie to me. It's a movie that I grew up watching and singing along to, even if I didn't understand anything that was happening when I was younger. I think that speaks to how the movie can move you, not just through the music, but also how relatable the characters are. Like I said earlier, going out of its way to introduce you to the characters in the beginning went a long way towards making you invested in what happens to them later. As I grew up, usually I expected certain movies to get worse over time, but every time I watched The Five Heartbeats, it just got better and better. The movie is so convincing that there are people to this day who still think it's a true story based on a real group. If that's not influential, then I need you to show me a better example of the word. I couldn't play any of the music, but the soundtrack is top notch, and even if it wasn't a soundtrack to a film, it would still be classic material. The Five Heartbeats just has a certain kind of charm to it. I can't really explain it. Any negatives you can give it can easily be offset by something equally as impressive. There's no one thing that's really overly impressive with it, but it's how all the little things come together to create a memorable story that makes it timeless. Try as I might to find something that doesn't work today, I fail every time. The one-liners alone are enough to keep this movie in the hearts and minds of its fans for years to come. My grade for The Five Heartbeats is an A. This is Robert Townsend's best movie, and I'm glad that he fought to bring his vision to the screen. And that's it for this episode of the BlackTrack. Let me know some of your memories and favorite scenes from The Five Heartbeats in the comments below. And if you liked the video, don't forget to drop a like and a subscribe and tell your friends about my channel. It'll really help a lot. Until next time, I'll holler at you.